Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Understable Discourse, your go-to place for all the best disc golf content there is out there. And, we have the MVP Open this upcoming weekend, which starts tomorrow. It's pretty exciting. The MVP Open is always a blast of an event. I would say largely most people really like Maple Hill. Some pros have some different opinions on it, but across the board, I mean, it is the number one course in the United States for a reason. So a lot of people hopefully going to tune in and watch the MVP Open. And we're going to kind of get into sort of what the playoff picture looks like for certain people. We're going to talk about the course changes, because there are several course changes, some being very dramatic. And then just, make our predictions for the weekend and have a good time, get you in and get out. So just as a reminder, the way the playoffs work this year is that now after we've gotten through the Green Mountain Championship, the top 80 MPO and top 40 FPO are playing this weekend at MVP. I think it's like technically 79 and 42, because there's always the nuance of like someone gets in because of a tie or whatever it may be. That remains to be said. But the top 80 MPO and top 40 FPO generally are playing this weekend. And after the event is over, you take the points from the event, add them to the other playoff points from GMC, and then add the playoff points to the total for the players, and the top 28 MPO and top 18 FPO in points are going to advance to the Tour Championship. Technically, the website says the top 19 FPO because it lists Kristen Lott in the list there. They didn't remove her, so it's the top 18 finishers that are actually playing disc golf right now. And the extra people are going to get in with the top 4 MPO and top 2 FPO players who do not qualify using the point system, but instead are the best finishers of the non-qualifiers at this event. So basically what that means is that you have your top 28 MPO players, and let's say we take 2 of the players that are currently outside looking in. Let's say Austin Turner and Joey Buckets, right? Let's say they're in position 29 and 30. So they're looking on the outside in. They can't make it with tour point standings, MVP finishes, and they still don't make it in. And they're sitting in position 28 or 29 and 30. But they finish in 24th and 25th place, better than anybody else who falls outside of the cut line. They, along with the next 2, will make it in. So there is an incentive for players who maybe aren't, that don't have enough points to play well, because you could arguably make it into you could definitely make it into the event if you haven't crossed the point threshold just by playing really well this weekend. I think for most of those players that are outside looking in, they're trying to aim for a top 20 finish. Top 15 should secure you the position unless a bunch of people do it. But I feel like with this field and the number of players that have made it in, a top 20 finish, I think, it makes a great argument for you to advance to the Pro Tour Championship. And so there's arguments that can be made about whether or not does this reward players who have not done well all year long and then gives them an opportunity to make it in. Sure, that is something you can definitely say, but the point of the way this was designed was to create an opportunity for players who maybe have missed part of the year because of injury, or they had to step away for personal reasons, or whatever it may be. It gives them an opportunity to come in and play really well and make it in. And ultimately, even if someone were to get in who hasn't played well all year, this adds an extra level of story and drama to this event, where it's not just, oh, who's going to win? Now we're actually caring about that bottom part of the field, because for some people, I mean, we all know getting into the Tour Championship is a big deal because there's a lot of money given out at the Tour Championship, even for people who don't finish well. So this could be a really, really big deal for someone down the leaderboard who, they're trying to salvage a season. Maybe it hasn't gone very well, and getting into the Tour Championship gives them a chance to win a couple $1,000s and, salvage the remainder of their year. So it's a big deal for a lot of people. And I like the change. I think it's a good way of doing it, and I'm excited to see how that plays out. The big key is going to be, will they on coverage actually make a point to talk about that storyline, showcase the people who are on the bubble? We've seen them attempt to do that in the past. It'd be a real letdown if they don't do it this weekend. So whoever's in charge of making sure that happens, they best be on their A game, because that's what we're all going to be watching for. And so then additionally, there is a third way to make the Tour Championship, and that is to be a Tour winner. So if you've not qualified by the other two methods, they're going to bring in the Tour winners, and they're going to slot them below the other qualifiers. So technically, like, let's say the top 28 make it in, then the next 4 who did not qualify but finished the best, they make it in. So they're now positions 29 through 32. Anyone who didn't make it from those two groups makes it in, and they are now at position 33. So there's 2 people who are not inside the cut line who that matters for, and that's Mauri Vilman and Ben Callaway. Now, I just learned recently that Mauri Vilman is not going to be able to play the Tour Championship because Estonia, which is where he's from, has a voluntary military service training that pretty much all men have to take a part of. So he will not be able to compete, and that's a big deal for a number of reasons. Number one, I would love to see him play, but it's part of his country's duty to do that. So say what you will about that, but it's also a big deal from a positional perspective because Ben Callaway is the other guy here. And here's where this gets really interesting for players. If you make it into the Tour Championship using one of the first 2 qualification methods, that's technically how you got in. So, for instance, if, let's say Mauri Vilman, who is the first person outside the cut line, let's say he didn't have to return for this training. If he were to make it in and play well enough to now be inside the top 28 players, that's the position that he would fill. Which means that we would only fill to 32 spots. Whereas if he did not play well, did not finish well, he would still make it in as spot 33. So by playing well enough, he is technically locking out a person from making it into the Tour Championship. It's kind of crazy to think about. That's still the case for Ben Callaway, who is a Pro Tour winner with his win in the Forever playoff on hole 18 at Crowcole. So Ben Callaway could technically be a spot buster for people by making it in, but by making it in with one of the first 2 methods and not by just his win alone. So a lot to look at there, a lot of little nuances. I think it's really interesting, and maybe that's something that the Pro Tour didn't anticipate, or maybe next year it's just if you win, you don't count. I don't know how that works. It'd be kind of hard to say that the 9 people who won or 8 people who won this year, they don't count towards the top 28. That feels disingenuous. So I think either way, you kind of have this weird occurrence, and we'll see if it matters this year. We'll see if it matters. But there are some players who are definitely on the bubble. For the MPO players, I think that anyone who has less than 800 points is probably going to be looking over their shoulder this weekend. They find themselves only about 100 or so points above the people that are outside the cut line, and you only need to finish in, I want to say 20th place for 85 points. 15th place gets you 115 points. So anyone who has less than 800 points is definitely not in a position where they can sit back and go, I'm in 100%. They're going to need to finish relatively decently this weekend. And those are players like Casey White, Mason Ford, Eagle McMahon, Luke Taylor, Andrew Presnell, Paul Kranz, and Jake Mon. So all of those guys are going to need to play well this weekend and finish in the top 25 if I think they want to secure their spot. I think most of them are going to be able to do that. So for those on the outside, if you're within 100 points, I think it's doable that you could make it in. And not just from a points perspective. Obviously, any of these guys could play well enough to make it in just because of their finishing position. But from a points perspective, you're looking at Austin Turner, Joey Buckets, Matty O, Silas Schultz, Paul Ulibarri, Robert Burridge, and Zach Nash. I think are all close enough that a solid finish and some fumbles from some people above them could put them in a position to become a points qualifier and not need to just finish well. So we'll see how that goes. On the FPO side, there aren't very many people in a position to A, lose their spot, or B, earn a spot. It's a very compressed group. And so I think that Emily Weatherman and Lisa Fakis are probably the only 2 that are in the hot seat on the cut line who need to play well this weekend. Addison Walker is extremely close. I think she's like only a couple points away. So a mild performance from her gets her in. And then you've got some other players who aren't in who could, like Sophia Donica. You got Alexis Mandujano, and then the last one is Rebecca Dawn, who's kind of a long shot, but she's the kind of player who could absolutely 100% get a top 10 finish at MVP. And she's played great all season long. It'd be really awesome to see her, a young player, come in and do well and make it into the Tour Championship. Now, let's get into the actual course itself. Maple Hill, right? I think for the large part, most of the audience out there knows what Maple Hill is. They've experienced Maple Hill. Maybe you've been there. And it's the number one course in the United States. It, for a while, was the number one course in the world, but we now have amazing courses like Krokol and Ale. So there's just, I think, one of the things that makes Maple Hill, there's two things that make Maple Hill fantastic. Number one, it has some of the most iconic holes on tour. When you think about holes that are just icons, you think about holes like hole 8, hole 14, hole 1. You think about hole 4 going downhill to the water. 5, the big forehand out and around that people have aced before. You think about hole 18. There's so many iconic holes at Maple Hill. And then number 2, the atmosphere at the MVP Open is unlike, I would say, any atmosphere on tour. There are a few places that have their moments. Like you've got the people who post up on hole 5 out at Des Moines, the B people, the Hive, the Hive 5. They are really a direct spawn of the 8 holes who sit out there at Maple Hill. And when you're at Maple Hill, if you've never been there before during the MVP Open, you can hear them on hole 8 anywhere on the course. There's not a single place on the course, even at the furthest place down the hill on the green of hole 11, you can still hear the 8 holes. And there's something about that ripples through the air when you're trying to play your round and you hear the roars of awesome things happening. It just adds an extra level of pressure that's, I think, unlike most other courses. You think about hole 1, it might be the prettiest hole 1 in disc golf. It's just to stand on that tee pad. I don't care who you are or how many times as a pro you've played it, you have to, I think, respect the beauty and the grandeur that hole has. And then finally, hole 18 is probably, in my opinion, is a very unique hole in that, do I think it's the prettiest hole 18 in the world? No, not in the slightest bit. Do I think it's the most electric hole to finish with? Yes, because you have a small green, it's a difficult shot to get into the green, surrounded by people. And it's just to go up that fairway, everyone's waiting to receive you. You got people standing on the second story of the sap house having some barbecue. Everyone is going nuts. There's an atmosphere around it that, I mean, if you haven't been there, I don't think you understand it. And I would always recommend, as someone who has volunteered at the MVP Open, someone who has spectated, someone who has played plenty of rounds at Maple Hill, it's definitely worth going out to. And if you could only make it out to one Pro Tour event and you're in on the East Coast or Northeast area, it's a must go to event for you as a spectator. But there are a few changes, and that's very, very common out here at Maple Hill because Steve Dodge, the owner of the course, I think there's this thing where you have a course for so long that you kind of get itchy to make changes to. And I think that he makes changes according to what he sees from statistics from the events, which is a good thing sometimes and is not a good thing other times. But a number of changes have been put into effect this year. We are having another AB pin type of thing with, I want to say, only 2 or 3 holes having AB pin positions. But hole 1, the basket was moved back further into the clearing after the Chipmunk Gate, which is an interesting story if you've never heard that one before, about how a chipmunk lost somebody a tour series event. That's a story for another time. But the basket is now set further in there, so you're going to have people who need to get their shots deeper into that area, but it is surrounded by OB, and the OB looks like it's been tightened a little bit, so it's really important to have careful angle on your shot as it enters the triple mando. I think a lot of players are going to end up having, shallow C2 putts on that hole, just because it's not worth risking running something in there hard and skipping out of bounds and taking that extra stroke penalty. The rest of the front 9, except for hole 9, is pretty well untouched. Like I said, when you have a course as iconic as Maple Hill, it's very difficult to make changes. One thing that we don't see too much now, but will be in effect in the future, is on hole 2, they planted a line of trees along the middle of the fairway to sort of force people up the right side. They're tiny right now. Give that a few years, and I think hole 2 is going to become quite a behemoth on the course. But for the most part, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are all untouched. 7, we saw the change last year. I think it's a fantastic change on the course to not have the basket at the top of the road, but instead have it down in the gully, forcing a really technical shot off the tee. But hole 9 is where we see the next change, and it's not for the MPO field, it's for the FPO field. So typically the FPO play from the old tee pad position that MPO used to play from before they moved them up to the tunnel. And now the FPO are having their tee pad moved into that tunnel. So the MPO players have like a 400 plus foot tunnel they have to throw through to even get to a position to score on this hole. The FPO tee pad has now been placed about a third to halfway up that tunnel, making it so that they have a bit more of a difficult first shot into this hole, which for the par 4, I think that'll make the hole difficult. For the par 5, it's probably a good change because it's a bit of a soft par 5 from that position. You can play something safe to the top, safe down to the bottom, and then safe over the water and still manage to pick up a birdie. So I like the change for the FPO field. Hole 10 is one of, I would say, the most significant changes we're going to see for the MPO field. Hole 10, if you don't remember, is the castle hole. It is the one that goes straight up the hill. It's like, I want to say 375 feet normally, but it feels like you need 450 to 500 feet of raw power just to get up to even have a remote look at a putt, something that only a few players every single year were even capable of accomplishing. And what they've done is they've moved the tee pad up about 40 feet and then off to the right. And they've put it behind a gap that it's narrow enough that I could probably stand between the trees, reach out with both arms and touch both trees. Now the gap is close to the tee pad. It's mainly just mentally intimidating. It's not too difficult of a gap in general. But what makes the hole more difficult isn't necessarily the gap. It's the angle that the tee pad is now set at. So instead of going straight up at the basket, you are now, if you were to throw a straight shot through the gap, dead center straight through the gap, you will end up short in the woods below the castle green. So you now have to put something through the gap with a little bit of turn if you want to get it up there and be in position. I think that subtle nuance, even though the hole is now reachable by more players, that subtle nuance is going to make the hole more difficult. And so I think, the whole average 70% pars last year, and that could be why they made this change. They wanted to try to get closer to that like 33, 33, 33 mark, where it becomes, birdieable, parable, and bogeyable all at the same time. Will that happen here? I think it very well could. I would expect to see that par percentage come down. Probably not in the first round, but as the weekend goes on, I think we're going to see people understand that shot more and more and more, and we're going to see it get closer to what they expect it to be. I predict that this will be a change that most people will like. Hole 13 is the next change. We see a new short pin has been added to the entryway of the gap, forcing a more down-tempo shot for players, which honestly is a thing that the tour doesn't really do a lot, which is force professional players to down tempo on a downhill hole, which is very difficult to do because hole 13, some people throw that massive over the top Palinko kind of shot, whereas most players are throwing something hard and piercing down through the gap, trying to push as far as they possibly can. By having a basket near the entryway of the mouth of this set of woods means that anything with too much power is going to blow way past the basket and make birdie impossible. and you're really going to have to control your shot. So I'm actually excited to see this one. It's in effect for both MPO and FPO. I think it makes the birdie for FPO very doable, when in past the birdie on this hole for FPO has been very, very difficult to obtain. So this is a good change for the FPO, and I think a strategically interesting change for the MPO. The last change on the course is by far the largest change. It's hole 17. Hole 17 already, and then this is not for the FPO field. They have the same exact hole. This is for the MPO. Hole 17 already was a relatively difficult gap. Not too difficult in the way that it played, because once again, I think this is a subject of Steve or whoever looking at the stats of last year, which it averaged 52% birdie rate and a 38% par rate, and was very seldom bogeyed. And down the stretch, I think the goal is to make the course harder to score and have more teeth, so that you actually have to lock in, because a lot of the times down the stretch, you would kind of expect 15 to be a birdie for most players, 16 to be a par for most players, and 17 to be a birdie. So 18 was really the only score separator at the end of the course, but now 17 is going to be an absolute monster. It is so difficult that on camera during their practice round, Ezra said to Goose, I don't know how we're going to play this. Because they took the gap that they used to have to throw out of, and they moved the tee pad back 90 feet. So now you have this incredibly tiny gap at the end of the fairway, or at the end of the tunnel, and you have to clear 90 feet before you even get there. The OB still exists on the left, meaning any backhand shot that operates like a backhand shot is probably going to go out of bounds. And if you want to play the turnover, you have to put it so hard on the left side of that gap that if you take any kick, good luck. Good luck even saving bogey from those woods. So a forehand that pushes too straight is in the Christmas trees. You almost need to. The only shot that even looked correct, that it would work, was when Goose put out a very, very strong forehand that cut very hard right at the end. And even then, he just barely made it out of the Christmas trees and was now looking at an extremely difficult upshot into the green, where he still basically had to navigate the entire hill to get to the green. So this change dramatically increases the difficulty of not only the tee shot, but the upshot. And I wonder, is this going to be a case where they pivoted too hard, and now instead of having 52% birdies, 38% pars, are they going to end up with, 80% pars? I don't know. That remains to be seen. Maybe in future years we see some of those Christmas trees come out, so there is a viable landing zone after a demanding tee shot. I don't know that I like this change very much. I think it's going to be a pace of play destroyer as well. So we'll see. I'm excited to see how these are the best players in the world. They're going to figure it out somehow. But for a lot of players, I think what you don't want to see down the stretch are them just going for par. But we'll see. That remains to be seen until this weekend. And so over the last several years, that makes some significant changes to the course. And, I think that Steve likes adding distance and gap shots, and that's what's on his mind right now, and that's what we've been getting. So for competitors to be successful this weekend, I think that there are three main takeaways or goals that they have to keep in mind. Number one, if you want to be successful at Maple Hill this weekend, you have to have very confident gap hitting. There are gaps on this course. When you think about the gap on the upshot for 1, the gap off the tee for 3, the gap for 4, the gap for 5, the gap for 6, the gap for 7, for hole 9. Let's see here. They're all over the place. 10 has a gap off the tee pad now. 11 has a gap as you approach the green. 12 has a late gap. 13 has a gap. 14 has a gap off the tee, but that's a pretty doable gap. 16 has a gap. Now 17 has a gap. So you got to be able to hit them off the tee. You got to be able to very strongly just demand that you're going to be an employee of Gapplebee's and hit all the gaps. Number 2, you have to have impeccable angle control. I don't know that I can think of another course on tour that plays with elevation more than Maple Hill. In fact, when you mentally walk through the course, I can only think of a couple holes that play flat. And I mean, almost, I mean, when we really think about it, hole 5, over the water to the green, technically is a flat hole. You're not going uphill or downhill. And then maybe, so hole 8, you're flat over the water. And then realistically, probably only hole 15. And that's it. Every other hole, you are playing with elevation. And even on some of those holes that I mentioned, you play kind of with a gully and then it comes back up. So having impeccable angle and nose control of your disc as you're going uphill and downhill is going to be key, especially if there's some wind, which it looks like there could be a little bit of wind. And then finally, a solid performance in C2, I think, is going to be necessary to be successful on the course. The weather is looking pretty decent, minus some thunderstorm chance threatening later in the day tomorrow, but it's been raining there all week, so probably not a lot of good time to get practice rounds in if you waited until the last few days. But for Friday through Sunday, it looks like there's going to be like mid-70s, slightly breezy, so solid weather there, but it's going to be a wet course probably for those first couple of days. But yeah, I mean, when we look at the actual players themselves and how I think they're going to do, I have to, for the FPO field, we have to look at how things are going. We got the current race, and I appreciate that the Pro Tour, they know at least what they're doing to a certain degree, because on the lead card, or the feature card, I should say, for tomorrow, you have Silva, Holland, Missy, and Owen. You have all 4 of the people who are vying for Player of the Year on the same card. Definitely not a mistake that happened. Very, very good decision from whoever's in charge of making that happen. So I think that your winner is going to come from that 4 with a flyer from Paige Pierce. And that's not me hopping on the Paige Pierce bandwagon because she won one event. It's more so if you look at her play. She dominated from C2 this past weekend and just had a lot of control we haven't seen from Paige in a while. She could also come out to MVP and finish in 30th. So, but I think your winner is going to come from one of those 5. In fact, I think your podium is going to come from those 5. And if I was forced to pick a winner amongst those 4 competitors, I'm going to have to give it to Silva. I think that she's got what it takes to win this one. Coming in second place, I'm going to go with Owen Scoggins. And then I'm going to take Missy Gannon in 3rd. And that's what I'll say for the FPO. For the MPO, it definitely gets a lot trickier, especially with players playing for, a lot. Ricky has a class 2 sprain on his ankle. So who knows if he's going to be playing or not. He says game time decision. I feel like it would be extremely foolish to play on such a up and down course with a stage 2 or class 2 sprain. I feel like he should hang it up and just go into USDGC. Like, why would he risk? He's gonna make it in to the Tour Championship already. He doesn't have to play this. He definitely can make it in with the points that he has. So why? Like, why play it? Why risk performance at USDGC just to play at MVP? But Gannon in a 4-round event, I know it just happened and he didn't win. But it just feels like you can't pick against Gannon. I mean, you just can't, I don't know. Yeah, I'm gonna take Gannon to win the event, but other players that I think we're gonna see some real good play from this weekend. Paul Macbeth, I think Niklas Antala can get the job done. I'm actually really excited to see Mari Vilman play out here. I think he's gonna do well. Isaac Robinson's another player who can do great. For me, I'm gonna have Gannon coming in 1st. I think I'm going to have Calvin coming in 2nd and Paul Macbeth getting 3rd place to round out the podium for the MPO field. But hey, those are my picks. What are yours? Have you played Maple Hill before? If you have, what's your favorite layout? Let me know down in the comments. And if you have picks for the weekend, put them down there as well. But yeah, this is the last playoff event, and then we go into a major and the Tour Championship. And that's it. Really hard to believe that the season is coming to a close this quickly, but should be a lot of fun this weekend. See some great play. But thank you all for being here. Thank you for watching. I appreciate every last one of you who does every week. Thank you for those who comment. And if you like what you heard, leave a like down below. Hit the subscribe button. It's one of the best ways to support the growth of this channel. And yeah, make sure that this week and weekend, if you're not playing disc golf, you're watching some disc golf. Until next time, this has been Understable Discourse.